Maya Chen stood outside Lincoln High School, taking a deep breath of the cool morning air. The building looked huge compared to her old school back in California. Red brick walls stretched up 3 stories, and students were already flowing through the main entrance like water through a dam. She adjusted her backpack straps and checked her phone one more time. 7:45 in the morning. First day at a new school as a senior. This was definitely not how she had planned to spend her final year. Her dad had gotten a promotion that required the whole family to move across the country. While Maya understood it was a great opportunity for him, she couldn't help feeling frustrated about leaving everything behind. Her friends, her favorite coffee shop, even her part-time job at the local bookstore, everything familiar was now 2,000 miles away. "You'll be fine, sweetheart," her mom had said that morning over breakfast. "You're strong and smart. Plus, it's only 9 months until graduation." Easy for her to say. She didn't have to walk into a school where everyone already had their friend groups and their routines. Maya pulled her schedule from her pocket and looked it over again. First period was advanced chemistry with Mr. Rodriguez. She had always been good at science, so at least that was something to look forward to. She walked through the front doors and immediately felt the familiar buzz of a busy high school. Lockers slammed shut, friends called out to each other, and teachers hurried down hallways with coffee cups in hand. The hallways were wider than her old school, with pale yellow walls covered in posters about upcoming events. Homecoming dance sign-ups, drama club auditions, varsity football tryouts. Maya found herself scanning the faces around her, wondering if any of these people might become friends. Most students seemed too busy with their own conversations to notice the new girl walking by. She found her locker easily enough and started working on the combination. 23-15-8. The metal door swung open with a slight squeak. Maya hung up her jacket and grabbed her chemistry textbook. "So far, so good. Excuse me, are you new here?" Maya turned to see a girl with curly red hair and a friendly smile standing next to her. She was wearing a blue sweater and had paint stains on her fingers. "Yeah, I just moved here from San Francisco," Maya replied, feeling relieved that someone was actually talking to her. "I'm Rachel. I'm in the art club, which is probably obvious from the paint," she said, holding up her colorful hands with a laugh. "What's your first class?" "Advanced chemistry with Mr. Rodriguez." "Oh, that's on the 2nd floor, East Wing. I can walk you there if you want. I have English right down the hall from there." Maya felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. "That would be great, thanks." As they walked toward the stairs, Rachel chatted easily about the school. She pointed out where the library was, warned Maya about the vending machine that sometimes ate your money, and mentioned which teachers were cool and which ones to avoid. It felt good to have someone showing her around. "So what brought your family here?" Rachel asked as they climbed the stairs. "My dad got a new job. He's an engineer, and the company offered him a position he couldn't turn down. My mom teaches elementary school, so she's starting at a new school too. That's tough moving senior year, but honestly, you picked a pretty good school. Most people here are decent. There are a few troublemakers, but every school has those." They reached the 2nd floor, and Rachel pointed down a long hallway. "Chemistry is the 3rd door on the right. Mr. Rodriguez is actually really cool. He does these crazy experiments that sometimes go wrong in the best way possible. Thanks for walking me up here. I really appreciate it." "No problem. Maybe I'll see you at lunch. I usually sit with some friends near the windows in the cafeteria." Maya nodded and watched Rachel head toward her English class. At least she had met one friendly person. That was more than she had hoped for on her first day. Chemistry class went well. Mr. Rodriguez was indeed cool, just as Rachel had said. He was a middle-aged man with gray hair and an infectious enthusiasm for science. He welcomed Maya to the class and didn't make a big deal about her being new, which she appreciated. The other students seemed focused on their work and didn't stare at her like she was some kind of exhibit. Her next few classes followed a similar pattern. The teachers were professional and welcoming, and most of the students were polite when she had to introduce herself. By the time lunch rolled around, Maya was feeling cautiously optimistic about Lincoln High. The cafeteria was massive, probably 3 times the size of her old school's. Round tables filled the space, and students had clearly established their territories. The athletes sat near the back corner, the theater kids clustered around tables near the stage area, and various other groups had claimed their spots throughout the room. Maya grabbed a sandwich and an apple from the lunch line and looked around for Rachel. She spotted the red curls near the windows, just as promised. Rachel waved her over enthusiastically. Maya, come sit with us. She gestured to the empty chair next to her. Everyone, this is Maya. She just moved here from California. The table included 5 other students who all seemed genuinely interested in meeting her. There was Kevin, who was on the debate team, Lisa from the school newspaper, Tom, who played guitar in a local band, and twins named Alex and Jordan, who were both in advanced math classes. So what's San Francisco like? Lisa asked, pulling out a notebook. I'm always curious about different cities. Maya found herself relaxing as she described her old neighborhood. The fog that rolled in from the ocean, and the steep hills that made walking anywhere a workout. The conversation flowed naturally, and she began to think that maybe this transition wouldn't be as difficult as she had feared. That's when she noticed him at a table across the cafeteria. Sat a boy who looked like he belonged in a movie about high school bullies. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with short blonde hair and a cocky expression. What caught Maya's attention wasn't his appearance, though. It was the way other students seemed to avoid making eye contact with him. As she watched, a younger student accidentally bumped into his chair while walking by. The boy stood up quickly, towering over the smaller kid. Maya couldn't hear what he was saying, but she could see the fear in the younger student's face. The boy said something that made his friends laugh, and the younger kid hurried away, clearly embarrassed. "Who's that?" Maya asked quietly, nodding toward the scene. The conversation at her table stopped abruptly. Rachel followed her gaze and her expression darkened. "That's Jake Morrison," Kevin said in a low voice. "He's basically the worst person in this school." "He thinks he owns the place," Alex added. "He's been picking on people since freshman year, and somehow he never gets in real trouble for it. The teachers know what he's like, but he's smart about when and where he causes problems," Lisa explained. "Plus, his dad is some big shot in town, so the school doesn't want to deal with the hassle." Maya watched as Jake sat back down, still laughing with his friends about whatever he had said to the younger student. Something about his whole attitude rubbed her the wrong way. She had known people like him before, people who thought being bigger or louder gave them the right to make others miserable. "Just stay away from him," Rachel advised. "Seriously. He loves picking on new kids, especially if he thinks they won't fight back." Maya nodded but kept watching Jake's table. She had a feeling this wouldn't be the last time she encountered Lincoln High's resident troublemaker. 3 days had passed since Maya's first day at Lincoln High, and she was starting to find her rhythm. Her classes were going well. She had managed to avoid getting lost in the hallways, and Rachel's friend group had welcomed her with open arms. Things were looking up, and Maya was beginning to think that maybe this whole moving thing wouldn't be so bad after all. It was Thursday, and the cafeteria was buzzing with its usual lunchtime energy. Maya had packed her lunch that morning, a turkey sandwich her mom had made along with an apple and a bottle of water. She preferred bringing her own food rather than dealing with the lunch line, which always seemed to take forever. Rachel and her friends were at their usual table by the windows. But today Maya had decided to sit alone for a bit. She had a chemistry test the next day, and she wanted to review her notes while she ate. Sometimes it was nice to have a few quiet minutes in the middle of a busy day. She found an empty table toward the center of the cafeteria and spread out her chemistry notebook. The periodic table stared back at her, and she started going over the elements she still had trouble remembering. Zinc, copper, silver, gold. The transition metals always gave her trouble. Maya was so focused on her studying that she didn't notice when the conversations at nearby tables started to quiet down. She didn't see the way some students began glancing in her direction with worried expressions. She was completely absorbed in her notes, trying to memorize the properties of different chemical compounds. Well. What do we have here?" The voice came from directly behind her, loud enough that several nearby tables could hear. Maya looked up from her notebook to see Jake Morrison standing there with his usual group of followers. Up close, he was even more intimidating than he had seemed from across the cafeteria. He was probably 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders and the kind of confident posture that came from never being challenged. "A little birdie told me we have some fresh blood in our school," Jake continued, walking around to face her. His friends spread out slightly, creating a semicircle that blocked Maya's view of the rest of the cafeteria. "California girl, right? I bet you think you're pretty special, coming from the big city." Maya looked up at him calmly, though her heart had started beating faster. "I'm just trying to study for my test tomorrow. Is there something you need?" Jake's friends snickered at her response. There were 4 of them, all boys who seemed to follow Jake's lead in everything. Maya recognized one of them from her history class, though she couldn't remember his name. He had always seemed quiet during class, but here he was laughing along with the others. "Oh, she's trying to study," Jake said in a mocking tone. "How precious." "You know what? I don't think I like your attitude, California. You come into our school thinking you're better than everyone else with your fancy studying and your neat little notebook." Without warning, Jake reached over and flicked Maya's water bottle. It toppled over, spilling water across her notebook and soaking into her sandwich. The water spread quickly, turning her carefully written chemistry notes into a blurry mess. "Oops," Jake said with a fake apologetic smile. "Sorry about that. Accidents happen, you know." Maya stared at her ruined notes for a moment, then looked back up at Jake. Around the cafeteria, other students were watching the scene unfold. Some had their phones out, probably recording what they expected would be another typical Jake Morrison show. Others looked uncomfortable but made no move to help. "That wasn't an accident," Maya said quietly, using napkins to try to soak up the water from her notebook. "Are you calling me a liar?" Jake's voice got louder, drawing even more attention from nearby tables. "I said it was an accident, California. Maybe you need to get your hearing checked." One of Jake's friends, a stocky boy with red hair, stepped closer. "Yeah, she's got attitude problems, Jake. Maybe we need to help her understand how things work around here." Maya continued cleaning up the water, trying to salvage what she could of her notes. She could feel dozens of eyes watching her, waiting to see what she would do. Some students looked sympathetic, but she could tell they were too scared to intervene. This was clearly Jake's territory and everyone knew it. "You know what I think?" Jake continued, his voice getting more aggressive. "I think you need to learn some respect. Maybe if you ask nicely, I'll consider letting you sit at our table tomorrow. You could learn a thing or two about how to fit in here." "I'm fine sitting by myself, thanks," Maya replied, not looking up from her damaged notebook. Jake didn't like that response. His expression darkened and he leaned down closer to her table. "I don't think you understand what I'm offering you, California. See, I run things around here. When I make a suggestion, smart people listen." Maya finally looked up at him directly. Her dark eyes met his blue ones, and for a moment, Jake seemed slightly taken aback by the intensity of her gaze. She didn't look scared or intimidated like most people did when he confronted them. If anything, she looked annoyed. "I heard you just fine," Maya said evenly. "And I said no thank you." The cafeteria had gotten significantly quieter now. Even students at tables across the room were craning their necks to see what was happening. Jake's reputation meant that when he targeted someone, it usually ended with the victim either running away in tears or completely humiliating themselves trying to appease him. Jake's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to being turned down, especially not by someone who should have been grateful for his attention. "You're making a big mistake, California. Nobody talks to me like that in my school." "It's not your school," Maya replied, still in that same calm tone. "It belongs to everyone who goes here." That was apparently the wrong thing to say. Jake's face flushed red and his friends moved in closer, sensing that their leader's authority was being challenged in a way that couldn't be ignored. "Give me that," Jake said suddenly, reaching for Maya's chemistry notebook. "Maybe if you can't appreciate what I'm trying to do for you, you don't deserve to have nice things." Before Maya could react, Jake had grabbed her notebook and held it up over his head, well out of her reach. Water was still dripping from the pages and some of her notes were completely illegible. "Please give that back," Maya said, standing up from her chair. "I need those notes for my test tomorrow." "Oh, you need them?" Jake taunted, waving the notebook around. "Maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to be rude to me." "You know what? I think these notes need some fresh air. Maybe I should take them outside and see how they look scattered around the parking lot." His friends burst out laughing at this suggestion. The red-haired boy pulled out his phone and started recording, probably planning to post the video online later. Around the cafeteria, other students watched with a mixture of fascination and horror. Maya took a step toward Jake, her expression still remarkably calm despite everything that had happened. "I'm asking you one more time. Please give me back my notebook." Jake laughed even harder at this. "Or what, California? What are you going to do about it? Run crying to the principal? Call your mommy? Face it, you're not in San Francisco anymore. Out here, you follow my rules." The notebook was still held high above Maya's head, just out of reach. Jake was clearly enjoying himself, basking in the attention from his audience and the power he held over the situation. This was exactly the kind of scenario he lived for, the chance to remind everyone who was really in charge at Lincoln High. What Jake didn't know was that Maya Chen had been preparing for moments like this her entire life. Maya stood perfectly still for a moment, looking up at her notebook that Jake was waving around like some kind of trophy. The cafeteria had gone almost completely quiet now, with dozens of students watching to see what would happen next. Some had their phones out, recording what they expected would be another humiliating victory for Jake Morrison. But something was different about this situation, and the more observant students were starting to notice it. Maya wasn't crying. She wasn't begging. She wasn't even looking particularly upset. Instead, there was something in her posture, something in the way she carried herself, that suggested she was far from helpless. "I'm going to ask you one more time," Maya said, her voice so calm it was almost unsettling. "Please give me back my notebook." Jake laughed even louder at this, encouraged by the audience around him. "One more time? What are you, some kind of broken record? I already told you, California, this is my school. You don't get to make demands here." He waved the notebook higher, making sure everyone could see how completely he controlled the situation. Water continued to drip from the soggy pages onto the cafeteria floor below. His friends were grinning and nudging each other, clearly enjoying the show. "You know what?" Jake continued, his voice getting louder and more theatrical. "I don't think you understand the lesson I'm trying to teach you here. So let me make it really simple. In this school, you show me respect or you get embarrassed. Your choice, California." Maya took a slow, deep breath. Her father's voice echoed in her mind, words he had repeated countless times during their training sessions over the years. "Control your emotions, Maya. Anger makes you sloppy. Calm makes you precise." She looked around the cafeteria briefly, taking note of where Jake's friends were positioned, where the nearest tables were, and, most importantly, exactly how Jake was standing. He was holding the notebook with his right hand, extended up and slightly to his left. His weight was mostly on his back foot, and his stance was wide but unbalanced. Classic bully posture, designed to look intimidating but actually quite vulnerable to someone who knew what to look for. "Okay," Maya said simply, and stepped forward. Jake initially thought she was going to jump for the notebook or maybe try to push him, which would have given him the perfect excuse to make things even worse for her. His friends tensed up, ready to help if needed, though they doubted it would be necessary. Jake was 6 feet tall and probably outweighed Maya by 60 pounds. Instead, Maya moved with a speed and precision that caught everyone completely off guard. In one fluid motion, she stepped in close to Jake and reached up, but not for the notebook. Her left hand found his wrist, the one holding her property, while her right hand located a specific pressure point just below his elbow. Jake's confident grin disappeared instantly as Maya applied exactly the right amount of pressure to the nerve cluster she had been taught to find. The sensation was immediate and overwhelming, like lightning shooting down his entire arm. His fingers opened involuntarily and the notebook fell to the floor with a wet slap. "What the?" Jake started to say, but the words caught in his throat as the pain intensified. Maya's grip was precise and controlled, applying pressure in a way that caused significant discomfort without actually injuring him. This was exactly what her sensei had taught her, the difference between self-defense and aggression. "I asked you nicely," Maya said quietly, maintaining her hold on Jake's arm. 3 times, actually. You chose not to listen." The transformation in the cafeteria was immediate and dramatic. Students who had been expecting to see Maya humiliated were, instead, watching Jake Morrison, the school's most feared bully, being controlled by a girl half his size. Phones that had been recording his expected victory were now capturing his complete powerlessness. Jake tried to pull away, but Maya's training had taught her how to maintain control. She shifted her position slightly, applying pressure to a different nerve point that sent waves of discomfort up his shoulder. Jake's face went pale, and for the first time in probably years, he looked genuinely frightened. "Please," he said, his voice much quieter now. "Please let go. I'm sorry." Maya studied his face for a moment, looking for any sign that he was planning to retaliate the moment she released him. What she saw instead was genuine fear and confusion. Jake Morrison had probably never been in a situation where he wasn't the one in control, and he clearly had no idea how to handle it. "Are you going to leave me alone?" Maya asked, her voice still calm and measured. "Yes," Jake said quickly. "Yes, I won't bother you anymore. I promise." Are you going to leave other people alone too? Or are you going to keep picking on people who can't defend themselves? This question seemed to confuse Jake even more. He was used to being asked to stop bothering specific people, but no one had ever demanded that he change his entire approach to dealing with others. I don't know what you mean, he said, though his voice suggested he knew exactly what she meant. Maya increased the pressure slightly, just enough to remind him who was currently in charge of the situation. I think you do know what I mean, Jake. You've been hurting people for a long time, making them feel small and scared. How does it feel to be on the other side of that? Around the cafeteria, students were starting to whisper among themselves. Some looked amazed, others looked worried about what might happen next. But everyone was paying attention. This was definitely not how these confrontations usually went. Jake's friends, meanwhile, had backed away several steps. They were clearly unsure whether they should try to help their leader or just stay out of the way. The red-haired boy who had been recording everything was still holding up his phone, but his expression had changed from excitement to uncertainty. I'm sorry, Jake said again, and this time it sounded more genuine. I'm really sorry. I won't bother anyone anymore. Just please let me go. Maya held the position for another few seconds, making sure her message was completely clear. Then, as quickly as she had applied the hold, she released it and stepped back. Jake immediately grabbed his arm, rubbing the spots where she had applied pressure. Thank you, Maya said politely, bending down to pick up her soggy notebook. I appreciate your apology. She began gathering her things, acting as if what had just happened was perfectly normal. Around the cafeteria, students continued to stare in amazement. Many of them had never seen Jake Morrison look anything other than completely confident and in control. Jake stood there for a moment, still rubbing his arm and trying to process what had just occurred. His friends remained several feet away, clearly unsure how to react. The entire social dynamic of the cafeteria had shifted in the span of about 30 seconds. How did you? Jake started to ask, then stopped himself. He looked around the cafeteria, suddenly very aware of all the phones that had recorded his humiliation. His reputation as the school's untouchable bully had just been completely destroyed in front of dozens of witnesses. Maya finished packing her things and looked at Jake one more time. I hope we can both just focus on our schoolwork from now on, she said simply. That's really all I wanted to do in the first place. With that, she walked away, leaving Jake standing alone in the middle of the cafeteria while students continued to stare and whisper. The entire encounter had lasted less than 2 minutes, but everyone present knew they had just witnessed something that would change the social landscape of Lincoln High School forever. Maya found an empty table near the windows and sat down to assess the damage to her chemistry notes. Much of the writing was still readable, and she figured she could probably study enough to do well on tomorrow's test. As she worked, she could feel dozens of pairs of eyes watching her. But for the first time since arriving at Lincoln High, she didn't mind the attention, as Maya sat down at her new table, still calmly organizing her damp chemistry notes. Jake remained frozen in the middle of the cafeteria. His arm was still tingling from where she had applied pressure, and his mind was racing to understand what had just happened. Around him, the whispers were getting louder as students processed what they had witnessed. Dude, what just happened? Asked Tyler, one of Jake's closest friends, finally approaching him. How did she do that to you? Jake looked down at his arm, then back at Maya, who was sitting peacefully by the windows as if nothing unusual had occurred. I have no idea, he admitted quietly. I've never felt anything like that before. The red-haired boy, Danny, was still holding his phone, but he had stopped recording. Should I delete this video? He asked uncertainly. I mean, if word gets out... Word's already out, Jake said, looking around at all the other phones that had captured his humiliation. Half the school probably saw what happened. Meanwhile, Rachel had spotted Maya at her new table and quickly gathered their friends to come check on her. They approached cautiously, still amazed by what they had witnessed. Maya, are you okay? Rachel asked, sliding into the seat across from her. That was incredible. How did you know how to do that? Maya looked up from her notebook, seeming almost surprised by the question. Do what? Oh, you mean with Jake? She shrugged casually. I've been taking martial arts since I was 6 years old. My dad insisted on it. Kevin sat down next to Rachel, his eyes wide with curiosity. What kind of martial arts? That didn't look like anything I've seen in movies. Karate and jujitsu mostly, Maya explained, turning a page in her notebook to check if the writing was still readable. My dad was in the military for 12 years before I was born. He always said that knowing how to defend yourself was one of the most important skills anyone could learn. Lisa pulled out her own notebook, her journalist instincts kicking in. That was definitely not random luck. You knew exactly what you were doing. Maya nodded. My sensei always taught us that martial arts aren't about fighting. They're about control. Control of yourself, control of the situation, and if necessary, control of someone who's trying to hurt you or others. Tom leaned forward, fascinated. So you could have seriously hurt Jake if you wanted to? I could have, Maya said simply. But that wasn't the point. The point was to stop him from hurting me, and to make it clear that his behavior wasn't acceptable. Hurting him wouldn't have taught him anything except to be afraid of me specifically. Across the cafeteria, Jake was having a very different conversation with his friends. The confident swagger he usually carried was completely gone, replaced by confusion and something that looked a lot like shame. I don't understand, Jake said, sitting down heavily at their usual table. She's just some girl from California. How does some girl know how to do that? Danny finally put his phone away. Maybe she's not just some girl, Jake. Maybe you picked the wrong person to mess with. But she looked so normal, Jake protested. Quiet, studious, you know? Like all the other kids He trailed off, realizing what he was about to say. Like all the other kids you've bullied? Tyler finished for him. Maybe that's the problem, man. Maybe you've been picking on people for so long that you forgot some of them might actually be able to fight back. Jake looked over at Maya's table, where she was now surrounded by friends, all of them talking animatedly. She looked completely relaxed, laughing at something Rachel had said. It was hard to believe that the same person had just made him beg for mercy in front of half the school. The thing is, Jake said slowly, when she had me in that hold, she could have really hurt me. I could tell. But she didn't. She just made her point and let me go. Maybe that's what real strength looks like, Danny suggested. Not hurting people because you can, but stopping people from hurting others. Back at Maya's table, the conversation had moved on to her life in California and her family's military background. So your dad trained you personally? Alex asked, clearly impressed. Every weekend since I was little, Maya confirmed. He said that discipline and respect were the most important things he learned in the military, and he wanted to make sure I understood both. The martial arts training was just part of that. What did he teach you about using it? Jordan asked. I mean, did he ever tell you when it was okay to fight back? Maya considered the question carefully. He always said that martial arts should be a last resort. Try to talk your way out of problems first. Walk away if you can. But if someone is threatening you or someone else who can't defend themselves and there's no other option, then you do what you have to do to stop them. And you thought that's what was happening with Jake? Rachel asked. I asked him 3 times to give me back my notebook, Maya said. I was polite about it. I gave him every opportunity to just stop and walk away. When he refused and started making threats about destroying my property, I decided that talking wasn't going to work. Kevin shook his head in amazement. I can't believe you stayed so calm. If someone was waving my stuff around like that, I would have been furious. Getting angry would have made things worse, Maya explained. My dad always said that anger makes you sloppy. When you're angry, you make mistakes. When you're calm, you can think clearly and do exactly what needs to be done. Meanwhile, Jake was struggling with feelings he wasn't used to experiencing. For years, he had been the one making other people feel small and powerless. Now he knew what that felt like, and it was horrible. I can't believe I begged her to let me go, he said quietly, in front of everyone. Maybe it's good that you know how it feels now, Tyler said. Maybe you'll think twice before you do it to someone else. Jake looked around the cafeteria at the faces of students he had intimidated over the years. Some were still staring at him, but not with the fear he was used to seeing. Instead, they looked curious, maybe even hopeful, like they were wondering if this meant things might finally change. I never thought about it before, Jake admitted. How it felt for them, I mean. I just thought, I don't know what I thought. You thought it was funny, Danny said bluntly. We all did, but it wasn't funny for them. At Maya's table, someone asked the question that was on everyone's mind. So what happens now? Lisa asked. Do you think Jake will leave you alone? Maya considered this. I think he'll leave me alone, yes. But more importantly, I think he might leave other people alone too. Sometimes people don't realize how their actions affect others until they experience it themselves. You really think one incident could change someone like Jake Morrison? Tom asked, skeptically. Maybe not completely, Maya said, but it's a start. And sometimes that's all it takes, just one moment where someone realizes that their behavior has consequences. She looked over at Jake's table, where he was sitting quietly while his friends talked. For the first time since she had met him, he didn't look intimidating. He just looked like a confused teenager who was trying to figure out where he had gone wrong. Everyone deserves a chance to be better than they were yesterday, Maya added softly. Even bullies. The lunch period was almost over and students were starting to clean up their tables and head to their next classes. But the conversations about what had happened would continue for the rest of the day and beyond. Word was already spreading to students who hadn't been in the cafeteria, and by the end of the school day, practically everyone at Lincoln High would know that Jake Morrison had finally met his match. More importantly, they would know that Maya Chen was not someone to be underestimated, and that sometimes the quietest people carry the greatest strength. 3 weeks had passed since the cafeteria incident, and Lincoln High School felt like a completely different place. The change wasn't immediate or dramatic, but it was definitely real. Students who had spent years walking the hallways with their heads down were starting to make eye contact with each other. Conversations in the lunchroom were louder and more relaxed. Most importantly, the constant underlying tension that had existed for so long was finally beginning to fade. Maya had become something of a local legend, though she seemed genuinely uncomfortable with all the attention. Students would point her out in the hallways, whispering to their friends about what she had done to Jake Morrison. Some had even approached her asking if she could teach them self-defense, which she politely declined, suggesting they look into the school's martial arts club instead. I really don't want to be known as the girl who beat up the school bully, Maya confided to Rachel one afternoon as they walked to their lockers. That's not who I am. But you didn't beat him up, Rachel pointed out. You defended yourself and taught him a lesson. There's a big difference. I know, but some people don't see it that way. I heard Tommy from my math class telling people that I destroyed Jake. That's not what happened at all. Rachel stopped at her locker and turned to face Maya. So what do you want to be known for? Maya thought about this as she worked her combination. I want to be known for making things better, not for one moment where I had to stop someone from being terrible. As if summoned by their conversation, Jake Morrison appeared at the other end of the hallway. But this wasn't the Jake that everyone remembered from before. Gone was the confident swagger and the intimidating glare. Instead, he walked quietly, keeping to himself and avoiding eye contact with most students. Speaking of making things better, Rachel said quietly, Look. They watched as Jake approached a group of freshman students near the water fountain. Maya tensed slightly, old habits making her ready to intervene if necessary. But what happened next surprised everyone who was paying attention. Hey, Tyler, Jake said to one of the younger boys. I think you dropped this in the hallway. He held out a textbook that the freshman had been frantically searching for in his backpack. Oh, wow. Thanks, Tyler said, clearly surprised that Jake Morrison was not only talking to him but actually helping him. I didn't even realize I dropped it. No problem, Jake replied, then continued down the hallway without any of his usual fanfare. Rachel and Maya exchanged glances. This was the third time this week they had witnessed Jake doing something genuinely helpful for another student. It was like watching someone learn how to be a decent human being from scratch. That's really weird, Rachel said as they walked toward their next class. A month ago he would have kicked that book down the hallway just for fun. People can change, Maya said thoughtfully. Sometimes they just need the right motivation. The truth was, Jake Morrison was struggling with his new reality. For years, his identity had been built around being feared and respected through intimidation. Now that foundation was completely gone, and he had no idea who he was supposed to be instead. It had started the day after the cafeteria incident, when Jake had arrived at school expecting his usual group of friends to be waiting for him at their regular meeting spot by the gym. Instead, he found them talking quietly among themselves, and when they saw him approaching, the conversation stopped awkwardly. Hey guys, Jake had said, trying to sound normal. Ready for another day in paradise? Danny had looked uncomfortable. Jake, we need to talk about yesterday. What about it? So the new girl got lucky. It won't happen again. But Tyler had shaken his head. It wasn't luck, man. She knew exactly what she was doing. And honestly, watching you beg like that, it made me think about all the times we've watched other people beg you to stop. That conversation had been the beginning of Jake's isolation. One by one, his friends had distanced themselves from him, not out of cruelty, but because they were finally seeing their own behavior clearly for the first time. Without his crew backing him up, Jake had been forced to navigate the school environment as just another student, and it was eye-opening. He quickly discovered how many people actively avoided him. Students would change direction when they saw him coming, or suddenly find something very interesting to look at when he passed by. Teachers who had always been polite but wary now seemed more relaxed around him, as if they had been waiting for years for his reign of terror to end. But the most difficult part was seeing the relief in people's faces. Jake began to understand that his presence had been a source of constant stress for hundreds of students. Knowing that he had been the cause of so much fear and anxiety made him feel sick to his stomach. It was during this period of self-reflection that Jake had started noticing things he had never paid attention to before. Like how some students struggled to carry all their books between classes, or how the shy kids always sat alone at lunch, or how the younger students often looked lost and confused in the big hallways. Instead of seeing these things as opportunities for entertainment like he used to, Jake found himself wanting to help. It felt strange at first, almost foreign, but each small act of kindness made him feel a little bit better about himself. Maya, meanwhile, was dealing with her own unexpected developments. Her chemistry teacher, Mr. Rodriguez, had approached her after class one day with an interesting proposition. "Maya, I've been talking with some of the other teachers, and we're all impressed with how you handled yourself in that difficult situation a few weeks ago," he had said. "We've been discussing the idea of starting a peer mediation program here at Lincoln High, and we think you might be the perfect person to help get it off the ground." "What's peer mediation?" Maya had asked, though she suspected she knew where this was heading. It's a program where trained students help resolve conflicts between other students before they escalate into bigger problems. Instead of just punishing people after fights happen, we try to address the underlying issues and teach better communication skills. Maya had been intrigued by the idea. "You really think something like that would work here?" "I think you've already proven that it can work. You turned what could have been a violent confrontation into a teaching moment. That's exactly the kind of skill we need." 2 weeks later, Maya found herself standing in front of the school board, presenting a proposal for Lincoln High's first peer mediation program. She had spent hours researching similar programs at other schools, drafting guidelines, and preparing training materials. "The goal isn't to replace traditional discipline," Maya explained to the board members. "It's to give students tools to resolve their differences peacefully and to create a school environment where everyone feels safe and respected." The program was approved unanimously, and Maya began training a small group of volunteer students to serve as mediators. To everyone's surprise, one of the first people to sign up was Jake Morrison. "I know I'm probably the last person you expected to see here," Jake had said when he approached Maya after the first informational meeting. "But I think I need to learn how to solve problems without making them worse." Maya had studied his face carefully, looking for any sign that this was some kind of trick or revenge plot. What she saw instead was genuine remorse and a desire to be better. "Everyone deserves a chance to change," she had told him, echoing the words she had said weeks earlier in the cafeteria. "But you'll have to prove that you're serious." Jake had nodded. "I understand. And I am serious. I want to be part of the solution instead of part of the problem." 6 months later, Maya Chen was elected student body president in a landslide victory. Her campaign had focused on building a more inclusive and supportive school environment, and students responded enthusiastically to her message of positive change. Jake Morrison, meanwhile, had become one of the peer mediation program's most effective volunteers. His past as a bully actually made him uniquely qualified to understand the mindset of students who were heading down the wrong path, and he used that insight to help them find better ways to handle their frustrations. Lincoln High School had transformed from a place where students lived in fear of harassment into a community where differences were resolved through dialogue and mutual respect. And it all started with one quiet girl from California who refused to be intimidated, and one former bully who learned that true strength comes from lifting others up instead of tearing them down.